Food for us comes from our relatives. Whether they have wings or fins or roots, that is how we consider food. Food has a culture, it has a history, it has a story, it has relationships. For me, food has always been a source of sustenance and enjoyment. I never really gave it a second thought. The most I'd go is I don't care what I eat as long as it fills me up. Or I haven't had Mexican food in a while, so let's go for that. And as I continue on my endless rabbit hole of restaurant documentaries on YouTube, I got a better sense of food, but more on a superficial level. After all, the restaurants that are chosen to make such documentaries are all very successful and for good reason. But as much as I admire the hard work and their innovativeness of the products and how they respect the ingredients, that was only the first step of my understanding and appreciation of food. As the quote said, food for us comes from our relatives, whether they have wings or fins or roots. That is how we consider food. Food has a culture, it has a history, it has a story, it has relationships. And I've only come to understand what food meant from one of my favorite anime, Golden Kamui.
For those who don't know, Golden Kamuy is an anime set after the Russo-Japan War. A veteran Saichi Immortal Sugimoto pans for gold when he hears of the fabled Ainu gold. One thing led to another, and the supposed gold does in fact exist. Together, along with an Ainu girl, Asirpa, they set out on their quest for the prized treasure. However, they aren't the only ones who are after the gold, with a cast of absolutely unhinged and insane characters also racing for the gold. Tensions run high as each person's motive for the gold drives them to lengths that only those who are just as insane or entranced by their ideals follow them. Alliances are formed and broken as they do whatever they can to get a leg up on each other to secure themselves a prime position to claim the gold that they all so desperately seek. But as much as this kept me watching, what really enchanted me was the use of food, particularly in the first season. Now, as aforementioned, the plot revolves around the race for the Ainu gold. Although the Ainu part of the Ainu gold is something that raises an eyebrow, that was much more of an afterthought for me, as I'm sure they would be explained throughout the story. But then we are met with the Ainu girl Asirpa in the first episode. Although we could have easily learned about the Ainu through different segments and factoids throughout the show, the series does something rather interesting. At the end of the first episode, they kill a Wenkamui, or a bear that has failed to go into hibernation. In doing so, Sugimoto asks Cyril why she didn't disassemble the bear, and she replies that the Ainu don't use any part of the Wenkamui because it is believed to be an evil spirit that has killed a human. In this small interaction, we are introduced not just to the Ainu as an indigenous group, but an indigenous group that has their own beliefs and values. And this follows throughout the first season with how they like to hunt, how they understand their land, and how they use what they hunted and gathered, and so forth. And we see all of this through the eyes of our protagonist, the immortal Sugimoto. Sugimoto is a character who didn't know much about the Ainu, much like us. Although he's teamed up with Asirpa for her usefulness in the search for the Ainu gold, this quickly turns into an unlikely relationship that blooms through food. In fact, after they experience each other's food, there's a gag between them where Sugimoto would ask Asirpa, almost like a child at times, if something can be eaten, and she explains how they would be eaten and prepared. And Asirpa asks Sugimoto to put miso in her food, which she identifies and calls poop. It is only because Sugimoto's curiosity through food, which was the first thing that Asirpa introduced to him when they first met, that allows us to continue our expansion of the Ainu culture, which bleeds into the other aspects of their identity. As much as there is a cultural identity aspect to food, there is also an individual aspect. With a large cast comes multiple backstories, and to be as non-spoiler as possible. But the most interesting thing about the backstories told about the cast is that almost all of them had this theme or relation to food that stuck out. And may not be the most extravagant food or the tastiest. In fact, it didn't even have to be eaten. But the fact that there was this strong influence that food had when it comes to memories was something that really stuck out to me. One of my favorite scenes is when Asirpa and Sugimoto are hiding inside the carcass of a moose for warmth in order to brave the harsh blizzards. With nothing but time and each other, they naturally talk. Asirpa asks Sugimoto what his favorite food is, to which he replied, dried apricots. To her, it is a food that she had never tried before. Because of her relationship with Sugimoto, the prospect of trying something new was exciting. However, to Sugimoto, the memory of dried apricots is much different. It was the last thing that he ate with his friends before going off to war. It was a peaceful time where he was able to share smiles amongst the people who mean the most to him before going to the battlefield. He cries. Yet, the dichotomy between anticipation and remembrance is completely different between the two people talking about the same food.
To take a moment to talk about myself for a second, I am Vietnamese American. It's not that there's anything wrong with being Vietnamese, but I never really had any form of patriotism or pride towards my culture. I simply am just a Vietnamese American. As such, I grew up in a Vietnamese household. I speak the language, although I don't know how to read and write. Maybe I'll learn that someday. And more importantly, I've eaten the food all of my life. Up until now, I've only really known Vietnamese food as a description of flavors that made it different from other cuisines. Now I understand that those descriptions are reflective of the country and its people. A fresh assortment of greens that are farmed and plucked from its luscious land that makes you feel refreshed yet still makes you feel satisfied. As I'm writing this, I even remember when I would just eat slices of jalo and only eat the center of its, which is really funny. I kind of just left the ring of, I guess, the rind of it. But yeah, that was one of my earliest memories. In fact, I think it is my earliest memories, which I swear isn't. I'm not just saying that for the video. But with the boom of Vietnamese food, with the main culprits being pho and cafe soda, the popularity of Vietnamese food has skyrocketed, and as such, Vietnam in general. And I don't think there was a bigger avenue or catalyst other than food that you know gave Vietnam such a big spotlight. And of course, as someone who grew up culturally Vietnamese in America, I am privileged to be part of such a culturally inclusive country that lets me discover different cultures through food, such as others did mine. But to wrap it up, Golden Kamuy is one of my favorite anime. It is a story that was able to secretly trick me into considering food the way I do, and under the guise of an exhilarating race between truly psychotic yet lovable characters. I really recommend it. There is a fifth season about to come up, or not about to come up, but it is 4 seasons in. The last season is the fifth season, and I am super excited. But yeah, watch Golden Kamuy. It's great.